Hey everybody, it's Rachel here. Thanks so much for joining me and for being here for our time together for Cathedral Kids. So last week, just as a reminder, we heard a story about how Jesus calmed a big storm by speaking. Jesus simply spoke and the waves and the wind obeyed him and the big storm stopped. And so that story reminds us that Jesus is God and he has power over things that other people do not. And we also have been hearing from previous stories how Jesus is not only in charge of nature and has power over nature, but he also has power over sickness and death and all things like that. And so today we're going to hear another story that teaches us something about Jesus. And we also have another memory verse. And so at the end of the story, then I will go over that with you. But before I have you open up your Jesus Storybook Bible, if you want to follow along, I have a couple questions I want to ask you before I get into our story. And if you're watching this with somebody, you can ask this to each other. And if you're by yourself, then that's okay. But I encourage you, as I'm asking you, it's like a little game we're going to play, but as I go over this with you, I encourage you to talk about it out loud, to speak it out loud. And then maybe you could even say it to somebody if you're watching it with somebody else. But sometimes it's hard to know who somebody is. And sometimes we need clues in order to know who somebody is. And so for this little activity, what we're going to do is we're going to say it out loud. If you were trying to describe yourself to somebody, if you were trying to give somebody a clue as to who you are, what sort of things would you tell them? How would you describe yourself? So again, if you're with somebody, you can just talk about it together. And if you're by yourself, you can just say it out loud. So what would you tell somebody if you were trying to describe yourself? What clues would you give them? So you might tell them the color of your eyes. You might tell them that you have blue eyes or brown eyes. You might tell them the color of your hair, if you have brown hair or red hair or black hair or blonde hair. You might tell them what kind of hair you have, if it's straight or curly or wavy, if it's long or short, right? You might even tell them what color shirt you have on today. So what color shirt are you wearing today? Right. So sometimes it's helpful to get a clue as to learn who somebody is and to learn more about somebody. So our story today, the disciples were given a clue to learn a little bit more about who Jesus was, because even though they learned last week from our story that Jesus has power over nature and he had power over that storm, they still were a little bit unsure as to who he really was. They were a little bit, they just weren't quite sure who he was, that even the winds and the waves obeyed him. And so our story today is going to give them a clue, another clue as to who he is. Okay, so if you have your Jesus Storybook Bible and you want to go grab it, if you don't have it with you, then again, I encourage you to pause the video and go grab it. And if you do have it, and if you don't have it, again, totally okay. You can follow along and hear the story. But if you want to open up to page 244, then I will begin with our story. Our story today is called Filled Full, and this is the story of the feeding of the 5,000 from Matthew 14, Mark 6, and Luke 9. All right, so join me as I read our story. There were once 5,000 tired and hungry and probably very grumpy people sitting on a hillside waiting for their dinner or wanting their dinner. And 5,000 people, that's a lot of people, isn't it? If you think about how many people 5,000 are, that's a whole lot of people. They'd come to hear Jesus that day. They came before breakfast and they stayed all morning, all afternoon, and way past dinner. No one had meant to be out there that long, but that's how it was listening to Jesus, as if time did not exist. People could listen to Jesus for hours, and on this particular day, that's just what they did. But they hadn't brought enough food, and they couldn't just go and buy themselves a burger and fries to go because, of course, they were in the middle of nowhere with no shops or restaurants. And that kind of food wasn't even invented yet. Well, what would they do? And Jesus' friends had an idea. Let's send everyone home for dinner. So you can see there's Jesus and there's all of those people who were there listening to him. Even from that picture, that looks like quite a lot of people. They don't need to go, Jesus said. You can give them something to eat. Did Jesus want them to travel all the way to town and buy food for everyone? Jesus' friends panicked. But we don't have enough money. I mean, can you imagine having enough money to buy 5,000 people food? That's a lot of money. What food do you have? Jesus asked. Go and see. Now, there was a little boy in the crowd. He had brought a lunch that his mother had made for him that morning. He looked at his 5 loaves and 2 fish. It wasn't much. Not nearly enough for 5,000, but it was all he had. I have some, he said. And Jesus' friends laughed when they saw his little lunch. That's not nearly enough, they said. But they were wrong. Jesus knew it didn't matter how much the little boy had. God would make it enough, more than enough. And so Jesus said, bring me what you have. And so the little boy gave Jesus his lunch. Jesus winked at the little boy and he whispered in his ear, watch. How in the world will Jesus feed everyone with just that? Jesus' friends said, because they thought it was impossible. But Jesus knew the one who made all the fish in the oceans. And Jesus knew the one who in the very beginning had made everything out of nothing at all. How hard would something like this be for someone like that? Jesus took the little boy's lunch, looked up to heaven, and thanked his Father. Then Jesus gave the little lunch back to his friends. As Jesus' friends started to hand out the food, do you know what? It was the strangest thing, no matter how much they broke off. There was always more. And more. And more. Enough for 5,000. And everyone ate as much as they wanted. Second helpings, third helpings, even fourths, until they were full, and they still had leftovers. Well, Jesus did many miracles like this, things people thought couldn't happen, that weren't natural. But it was the most natural thing in all the world. It's what God had been doing from the very beginning, of course, taking the nothing and making it everything, taking the emptiness and filling it up, taking the darkness and making it light. So look at all of the people that were getting so much food from that one boy's little lunch that he had. So the food was multiplied. So that's the end of our story. So let's just think about that for a second. Can you imagine if you were, say, watching a football game or a basketball game, or you were somewhere at a concert with a lot of people? 5,000 people, remember, is a lot of people, right? Can you imagine offering up your lunch for that many people? So I packed my lunch today, just like the boy did in our story. So I want to show you something. so here's my lunch right here in my bag. And in my lunch, I have something similar to what the boy had in our story. In fact, let me show you this page again. And I have something kind of similar to this I want to show you. Let's see. Oops. I'm gonna make sure I'm showing you the right page. Okay. See all that food right there? See the little boy? So just like him, I also packed my lunch. So in my lunch bag here, I have a sandwich, one sandwich, and I also have a banana. So I have some fruit and I have a sandwich. So I want you to imagine, what if I told you that I wanted to share my lunch with you, with whoever's watching? So say there were 20 of you watching today, 15 of you watching, maybe there was just 7 people watching. Maybe it was just you and your family, so maybe only 5 people. Would this be enough to feed everybody? Would this be enough? A banana and a sandwich, that's all I have. Do you think this would be enough to feed everybody? You might each get 1 or 2 bites, right? Just a couple bites. So what if I wanted to feed my lunch today? So again, I have my sandwich and my banana. That's all I have for my lunch. What if today I were to drive around and for everybody that goes to our church, I were to deliver on their front porch, because remember, we can't see each other. What if I were to drive around and deliver a piece of my lunch, a bite of my lunch on everybody's front porch that goes to our church? So everybody that goes to the cathedral, I want to share my lunch with. This is all I have. Do you think I could do it? Do you think this is enough food to feed everybody at the cathedral if I were to drive around all over town and share it? Say it out loud. Would this be enough food? Probably not. Do you think if this is all I had, would people be full? If I were to give you and your family this, if I were to drive over right now in my car and leave this on your porch, do you think this is enough food for your family lunch? Would you be able to get seconds and thirds? Would you be full after you had this? What do you think? No? Are you sure? So that's exactly right. So if I was just trying to do this, if I was just trying to give you my lunch like that, I don't think you would get full. I don't think we could feed everybody from church with just that food, right? But you know what's pretty awesome? And the story that we heard today, God made it happen, right? God saw that the little boy just had a very, very small lunch, but God multiplied it. He made a way for that small amount of food to be multiplied to feed 5,000 people, which is pretty awesome, right? That Jesus was able to feed everybody with that small amount of food because he is God. Because again, he has power over the dead and he's able to heal the sick. He's able to calm a storm. And now we've heard that Jesus is able to heal or to feed 5,000 people with a packed lunch. So after witnessing that, after the disciples were able to see that Jesus was able to feed that many people, what do you think that they might have learned about who Jesus was after they saw that? What do you think that they might have been able to learn about Jesus from seeing the way that he fed 5,000 people? That Jesus is perfect? And that Jesus is powerful? That's exactly right. Those are great answers. That's right. That Jesus is God and that he can do things that other people cannot do. And he can take nothing and he can make it everything, because that is exactly who he is. So I just love that story. And I think something that might be really good for you to do as you eat your lunch today, or if you've already had lunch, if you think about this as you eat a snack or you eat dinner, just remember that your food and everything that you eat is a blessing. And let's be thankful this week as we are still in the middle of a bunch of strange stuff going on, and it might feel really lonely at times or weird. Hopefully you're having some fun, like I said too, but let's remember to thank Jesus for providing food for us and for our families. And let's also ask him to help other people around us who might not have food. Let's pray and ask Jesus to help other people be nourished and to not go hungry. So that is our homework assignment for this week, is to be thankful and to thank Jesus for the food that we have, and also pray for others around us who might not have food, and maybe even talk to your mom and dad about ways that you might be able to get out and help others around you who are hungry and who might not have food. So I also wanted to show you, if you want to ask your mom and dad to print this off, this is a page from our curriculum, and I'll be sending this out, but this is a really fun worksheet that you can do. In each of those boxes, you are to draw what it tells you to draw. So you'll be drawing a loaf of bread, fish, all the people, the 5,000 people, and then you can write down here what you were able to discover about Jesus from our story today. So this could be a really fun worksheet for you. And I will also be sending out some coloring sheets that if you want to ask your mom and dad to print that off. And that again will just be a reminder of our story that we heard together. But our memory verse for this week is the same as it was last week. Does anybody remember it? Raise your hand if you remember what it was. Okay, so I'm going to say it out loud. And so I want you to say it out loud with me. Ready? So with God, start over. With man, things are impossible. But with God, all things are possible. Okay, now I want you to say it as loud as you possibly can on 3. 1, 2, 3. With man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. Great job. So now I want you to say it as quiet as you can, okay? And I can't even hear you, so that it's perfect. With man, this is impossible. And with God, all things are possible. Great job, everybody. Well, thanks so much for hearing the story today with me and for being a part of our Cathedral Kids story time. And I hope each of you have a great week. And I will be doing another Zoom call on Wednesday afternoon. So if you're interested, then ask your mom and dad about it, or your grandparents, or whoever. And I'll make sure that they have the link to that. But we'll just be hanging out, getting to talk to each other, and we usually play a couple games and stuff like that. So if you're interested, then make sure you ask about our Zoom call on Wednesday afternoons at 4 o'clock. But I hope you'll have a great week, and I look forward to reading to you again next week.